how to choose the perfect wedding cake for your big day.
Hi, welcome back to Bride Society. I'm Laura, this is Rebecca, and we are here to help you with one of the most important parts of your wedding planning process, which is of course the wedding cake. So you've got your date booked, you've got your venue, you might have organised your photographer, your attentions might now be turning to the other parts of the wedding that you want to kind of get the ball rolling with. So it's thinking about wedding cake and if you're going to have one, what you're going to have, what size, what decoration, all that. So we're going to give you some tips on how to plan for your perfect wedding cake.
So budget.
Important.
Yeah. Cake does sadly cost money. I wish people would just give me cake for free, but they do deserve to be paid. And I do mean that because Laura does have a wedding cake business and I do think she should get paid for what she does.
I have a mortgage to pay.
But still, let there be cake. Yes, so budget. Yeah, we know weddings cost a lot and yeah, cake is obviously one of those things, but I guess how much of your budget that takes up is partly dependent on how important that facet of the day is to you and your partner. I'm guessing if you're watching this video, it's of some importance, but it might not, it might be for you that having a fancy car to get you to the wedding is more important than the stature of the cake. So yeah, although like when you're just starting out and you've never looked at wedding cakes before, it's really hard to know, well, how much is a wedding cake? I don't know how much to budget for that. But in talking in loose terms and saying like starting off by deciding where you're prioritizing your budget and therefore kind of how much you're willing to give over it. And the more important the cake is to you might be where you kind of go, okay, yeah, we'll spend this. Yeah.
Well, it also means that it's whether you'd still like to have a cake, but whether you go down the route of kind of a Marks and Spencer's more generic cake rather than a custom-made, bespoke, personal to you kind of cake. There'll be a massive range in prices there, and you still get the same end result. You still get some cake at your wedding, but obviously very different budgets. And of course budget does vary by location, by the design you're choosing, the size of the cake, how many portions you need for it. But say, to give maybe a very general ballpark figure, and yes. Again this...
Lots of caveats, yeah. Very general, but we all know it's very useful just to have, like I said, you've got no idea what you're in for price-wise before you do this. So very general, just notes.
Yes, just to give you some idea of where we might be talking if you had 80, 100 guests, you wanted a 3-tier cake with a very, a simple-ish design, going to a baker for this, you're maybe in the ballpark of £400 to £500. But again, there will be people doing it much cheaper, there will be more expensive. If you want elaborate decoration, that will cost. So yes, we're just putting that out there as a price.
Yeah,
and then you can work with that.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you don't know when you're starting out whether you're dealing with something that costs £80 or £1,000, you don't know where you are. So hopefully, just as a mental kind of rough starting point, but say all the caveats.
Yeah.
And as well, it's worth asking, your person who's quoting you, clarifying, does the price you're quoting include your delivery and setup costs? What else is included? Are there cake stands? Do you need to provide a cake stand? So there's other things to clarify in there too when it comes to pricing and budgets. And
the size of the cake will be one of the biggest factors of how much the cake costs. And to work out what size of cake you might need is how many guests you might have. So if you know you're going to have about 100 guests, you can start to get an idea of the size of cake if you want to provide enough cake for all those guests. And you don't necessarily have to do that. And even as somebody who sells cake, even I will tell couples who come to see me, you don't need a cake to serve everybody unless you are choosing to serve the cake as part of your wedding meal and having it as dessert, in which case it's probably advisable to make sure there is a dessert portion for for everybody, so someone's not sitting at the table being like, oh, where's my pudding? If you are serving it in the evening in addition to maybe some other evening food, people will be busy dancing, people might be too full from other food you've served, so yeah, probably like 80%-ish, I would say, of your guests you could probably have enough cake for.
And the other thing is, if you're doing what you're saying, and where you may be choosing to serve your cake as the dessert of your wedding meal, the thing is, as well, not only will you then obviously need a portion for every guest, but the size of that portion is realistically going to need to be slightly bigger than when it's just being cut up later on to put on the side while people are dancing. That's more kind of like snack side, like bite size kind of thing, like a small, like taste. Whereas then you need a portion, right? Like, so it's actually a dessert kind of thing in itself. So so you may, in one part you might be going, oh, we'll save money on a third course by serving the cake, but your cake costs will then go up because you will need the full the full number of guests plus slightly bigger portions. So just again, it's just these all things just factor into your thinking, so you're kind of going in knowing what's what.
And also on that, you probably, what couples have done in the past that I've created cakes for, will also serve the cake with maybe some berries, some cream as part of the dessert of the meal. So there are, you might think, oh, I'm saving money here, but the little extras soon creep up.
So next, it's finding inspiration, right? We maybe all have a slight image in our heads of what a wedding cake looks like, and probably a very traditional immediate image pops to mind. But there are so many different ways of styling, like wedding cakes these days. So find inspiration, get inspired. So look on Pinterest, Instagram, wedding magazines for ideas. That there's literally mess around with the textures, the colours. It doesn't have to be white ivory anymore. There's literally so much choice. And actually, we have a wedding cake trends video up on our channel as well. So if you want to kind of see actually what are the kind of freshest, newest ideas in terms of wedding cakes that are out there, we have a whole video on that, which we'll link in the description box below for you as well.
And thinking about coordinating, matching the cake to the style and theme, colours that you're having in other parts of the wedding. So whether that's the flowers you're having elsewhere you can bring onto the cake, the type of venue might dictate possibly the style of cake that you decide to go for. You might be getting married in a barn, which doesn't necessarily lend itself to kind of a very traditional, ornate royal icing, lots of piping, pillars and all that jazz. Cake, you might want to go down the more like semi-naked or buttercream route. I mean, you're not forced to do that. You can do whatever you want. But if you're choosing a particular style of venue, that might also mean you lean more towards particular styles of cakes. So it's really just having a look around and see what catches your eye and going from there.
And as well, when it comes to flavours, you can mess with that too. So traditionally it would be fruitcake, which I'm still for if I get a vote, by the way.
Not
whatever. But as well, you can still stick with fruitcake, and if you're having multiple tiers, they don't all need to be the same flavour. So, or you can scrap the fruitcake entirely and just have different flavours or all the same, but they can all be sponge and flavours. So there's a lot you can do with this. So obviously there's classic flavours that you can go down, like sort of crowd favourites, your chocolate, your vanilla, that kind of thing. Or there's really now, I often see really unique options as to what you can make these. So from I guess that salted caramel is quite popular these days. But I know, what are some of the more unusual ones I
did a wedding where each tier had some sort of herb incorporated in the flavour. So I think there was a lemon and rosemary, there was some thyme in there was maybe some lavender. So that that was quite different. They didn't have any of the very classic flavours, but it's what they liked and what they enjoyed and worked for them. So
Yeah. And also, like, yeah, if you and your partner each have a particular favourite flavour, then you can both then incorporate that in the different tiers, because you can mix it up.
yes, just be aware that obviously the top tier is smaller, so you're not going to get quite as many portions. The bottom tier, you'll get more, so you can fight it out whose flavour wins on the bottom tier.
Yeah. Okay, with whatever you think is going to be the biggest crowd pleaser, you know, in that sense.
And of course, your guests might have some dietary restrictions that you want to be mindful of. You still want to include them so they have some cake. Depending on whether it's an allergy, intolerance and things like that, some guests might not be comfortable if you kind of have, say, a gluten-free tier as part of the cake, because there's too much cross-contamination and things like that going on. But you might decide you want to have some separate cupcakes, or a small separate cake if you've got kind of vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free guests, things like that. And then it's up to them if they choose to eat it, how comfortable they feel doing that. Getting advice from, if you have got dietary restrictions as part of the order, whether your baker can accommodate those, or if you need to go to a specialist, especially if it's something like celiac. You need to be careful, but also your baker will be able to advise you on whether that's possible or not. And then it just means your guests can all enjoy the wedding along with everybody else.
Cake for all.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of sort of finding this person to make your cake, obviously online searches, but wedding fairs are a great place to find your sort of baker, because, well, they'll also be there with sort of display cakes, so you can get a sense for their kind of style. Sometimes free sample, like little samples to take away. So again, you can kind of, see if you kind of like their flavours or their textures and things. So you get a bit of a sense for them, and if you feel like you can work with them, all that kind of thing as well. And then sort of stalking their internet, so like their Instagram page, obviously their website, where they'll have images as well, and obviously lots of information. But I often think cake bakers' like Instagram pages, obviously, where they'll post a lot of, or most of, their bakes. So if you want to kind of it's just getting that sense of like, oh, stylistically, are we kind of aligned, or they've done something before where I'm like, yes, that's what I want. And then you kind of go, okay, I know this person can do that. So it gives you that reassurance rather than kind of going to someone and go, this is what I want. Can you do it? And obviously that's perfect legitimate conversation. But I think, if you're able to kind of see something already in their kind of, I guess, modern version of portfolio, then you've got that reassurances that you know that person can execute what it is that you're thinking. Yeah,
and so many cake makers will potentially specialise in certain. They'll all have their own style, and I don't do fondant, sugar flowers, things like that. I'm more buttercream, whereas other people might not do buttercream cakes but stick to these beautiful sugar flowers, elaborate fondant cakes. So it's finding the right person. You could come to me and say, oh, could you do this fondant cake with these decorations? And yes, I could give it a good go, but I know that I wouldn't necessarily be the best person for that, so could recommend someone else. So if you're already finding the people that align with the style that you want and going straight to them, it's better for everybody, really. Saves time, and you get the best possible end product.
Yeah. And then once you kind of got into that stage, then you can arrange a cake tasting with them. So you might have tried a sample maybe at a wedding fair or something, but then when you're kind of getting down to trying to decide your weird and wonderful or safe flavours that we talked about before, but you might have got it down to a few. You want to kind of properly decide which flavours it is you want for your cake. So you will be able to arrange, or should be able to arrange, a cake tasting of some kind with that person to kind of go over that and discuss the finer details.
Now, something that might have certainly in the UK, a smallish factor in deciding maybe what kind of cake you're going for, but we have had some extremes in temperature. It does happen, is the weather. And if you've got a peak summer wedding day planned, knowing where you might want to be displaying the cake, and if it's somewhere that is likely to get very, very hot, you might want to consider either how the cake is stored and when it's put out on display, or the type of cake that you have, as fondant cover cakes do tend to stand up a little bit better in the heat than maybe a buttercream one. I mean, we're quite lucky that it is rare that we get such extreme temperatures that we experience like the melting buttercream kind of coming all the way off the cake. But in recent years, we have had some really high temperatures on odd days, and if that happened to fall on your wedding day, you might want to be thinking about whether the venue can store the cake somewhere cool up until cutting time, or just having it somewhere, maybe move it from where it was going to be displayed outside in the blazing sun to moving it into a nice air-conditioned venue instead.
Yeah, but ideally not into like a hot corner of a marquee.
No.
We're just going to swelter. Yeah.
But I know I tend to take into account the timings of the day in advance and try to set the cake up as late as possible, but early enough that guests haven't arrived, so you kind of in and out in the little cake elf, so people don't see you.
Cake
but
fairy.
If it's something to discuss,
I would like a cake fairy.
I'd like a cake fairy. Something to discuss with the person making your cake, because it may be possible that delivery timings can be adjusted, so it could be delivered later in the day if there's kind of potential for super hot temperatures, things like that.
And of course, personalise it. This is another opportunity for you and your partner to bring your personalities into your wedding, because we always say your wedding day should reflect the two of you. No cookie cutter weddings, it's the two of you, seeing you in your day, and your cake is another opportunity for that. So some of that might come through in, I say, the change of the kind of the design from the traditional look, in the textures, colours and things that are important to you, but also in terms of maybe you want to add like your monogram, maybe you want to add flowers to it, which is a fairly traditional thing, but it's thinking like, are there flowers that are maybe in your bouquet or other areas of the day, so you're kind of threading through some of your favourite flowers into it, that kind of thing. Or the cake topper that you might choose to put on it doesn't even have to sit on the top, just controversial, but these extra like embellishments or things that you can add that just again bring more of you into it. So for example, like my husband and I, so my husband is Canadian, I'm British, in case you couldn't guess from the accent, and so we had a little Canadian goose with a little bow tie on it and a swan with a little veil on it to sort of represent the two countries, and so that's how we kind of brought ourselves into that cake, and it's a fun little reflection of it, and made it, I think, interesting and personal, and I think that's all anyone really wants to see from your day, is like you in your wedding.
And you can even incorporate your pets if you want. If you can have little figures, if you've got dogs, and I've seen it where it's like burrowed out a little bit of the cake already, got a model of the dog. Lots of different touches that you can. So just it doesn't have to be a lot, but you can really just put your stamp on the cake.
And it also doesn't have to be traditional cake. I say these are the different styles that we talked about, but obviously there's also other things like cupcakes, mini cakes, which are slightly different from cupcakes. Or maybe you go for a whole dessert table.
Sounds good.
I mean, I'm there for that.
I'm pro that. We'll be there.
We'll be there. Or you just want like a small cutting cake, to go with all the other desserts, so you can have the cutting moment. So that is the way to go as well. If your cake's not high priority to you, but you still want the cake cutting moment, that could be the perfect cake for you, is just to have that kind of that little something. Or controversially, and I'm not advocating this, no cake at all. So cake alternatives, so not kind of necessarily ditching that whole element of the day, but or even the cake cutting moment, you can cut something else.
Like cheese is the one we've seen over several years. Pies. Anything really.
But it could be a cheesecake. It could be I think when we both said pie, like we're thinking like savoury pie because people are doing it with
like pork pies.
Yeah, that's the thing. But it could also be a sweet pie, right? Like it could be a blackberry pie. Like, you know, if it's just like an in thing between the two of you, like, you know, you two are really big on like, you've got an apple tree in your garden, and so, you know, having an apple pie would be really on the nose for you. Like, don't be afraid to experiment. Like, I mean, as long as it's cake, in my opinion, of some form. But yes, but yeah, the perfect cake for you might not actually be cake.
But if it is, or even if it isn't, this still applies. Don't forget about the styling or displaying your cake on the actual day. You're potentially spending quite a lot of money on this cake or whatever.
Or at least it's often a focal point for the cutting and that kind of thing.
So don't just shove it in a corner on a random table. Do it justice. At the very least, I would advise you put it on a cake stand, whether that's the venue's cake stand, because a lot of traditional venues will have a cake stand that you can borrow, or if your cake maker has one, or if you want to get one. And again, this could be like log slices, crates. It doesn't have to be the silver plateau cake stands that are very traditional. But just raising a cake up makes such a huge difference rather than just putting it directly onto a table. But you can make a real feature of this cake. You can make it like a styled area, cake backdrops.
Yeah, that's a thing now.
It is. Have it somewhere. I mean, you could even put it in the middle of the dance floor if you wanted to, but just...
not many cheers.
And obviously not while anyone's dancing around it, I think. But yes, have it... Make it if you're having a stylist or styling the wedding, don't forget about that area. You don't even have to put it on a table. It can be like on plinths. It can be on anything.
Swing,
a cake swing. So just there's so many options that you don't just need to plonk it on a round cake table provided by the venue.
We should say we do have a video coming up in the coming weeks about like cake backdrop ideas. If we've started talking about this and you're like, okay, this is interesting, but I can't quite picture that or think of these ideas. That's coming up, so do subscribe so you don't miss that video. But yes, but the next thing is obviously order in advance. You can't do this a week before. This is not an email that you can send a week before being like, I would like 3-tier cake by next Saturday, particularly in peak season. So really, honestly, we would advise if you come across the cake maker that you think, like, yeah, I've looked on their Instagram, like, I love everything that they're doing. They're roughly in the ballpark of what I think I might want, even if you don't know exactly what you want yet, then try and get them booked in ASAP. So as long as you know your date and your venue, that's really all the information that you need to be able to like lock in your baker, right?
Yes. They will take a deposit.
Yes.
And get you...
secure that date. So that, so you know you've got the person you want. And then you can firm up the design, the number of tiers, the flavours, all of those kind of things later down the line. You don't have to have all that information before you can book them. Because you might be thinking, I don't know all this stuff, so I can't possibly book them yet. That doesn't matter. Just get them in the diary, because like other suppliers, like photographers, all those kind of things, they get booked up because they typically, in the most part, can only take on one wedding a day, or maybe in a couple of days because of the baking and the decorating ahead of it. So it's not like maybe... I don't think there's many suppliers that maybe could do more than one wedding in a day.
No, not many.
I'm just trying to think of an example, but
like stationers, but that's probably because they're
not involved on the day. Any like on the day supplier that has to like show up and provide something on a day. So and obviously most weddings are on a Saturday. Most weddings are in the summer, springtime. So there is a definite peak season. So especially if you're planning to get married then, ASAP. But not to panic you at the same time. But like, how far in advance are you fairly booked up, generally speaking, would you say?
A year, at least, I mean, I get a bit nervous if someone contacts me for like 2 to 3 years down the line.
I can't think of my life that far away.
But definitely, a year, 18 months, and then I mean, sometimes, yes, much shorter time periods.
Yeah, you never know, you might get lucky.
Yeah. If you know who you want, get them booked in, firm up details later. We hope that was helpful and you're now well on your way to planning your perfect wedding cake. We are very nosy, so we would love to know what kind of cake you're thinking of. Are you thinking of any particular interesting flavours? What kind of styles, designs are you choosing? Do you think you're going to go something kind of that came up in our trends video, or are you going to do super classic? We just want to know, basically. We just want to know. Yeah.
Any comments about cake, we're good.
So if you like this video, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.